I breathed in deep, pulling the warm Georgia air into my lungs. Concentrate, son. Feel the energy building in your core. That's your reserve. That's the energy you'll push into your spell work. This will empower your runes, fill your barriers, and defend you from things that would do you harm. I felt something, but it was hard to explain. The fibers were there, the fledgling tendrils of whatever Grandpa was talking about, but it was like something hidden, only to have it slip away when you tried to grasp it. I'd reach for it, I'd find it, but whenever I tried to exert any kind of control over it, the energy would move away from me. Don't be so rough, boy. Let it come to you. You can't manhandle it. You gotta let it come through on its own. I sighed, opening my eyes as sweat stood out on my forehead. I'm trying, but it's like telling somebody don't think about it after giving them something to think about. We were sitting in a clearing area near the vegetable patch, our legs Indian style beneath us. Grandpa had been teaching me runes and sigils for about a year, but this was the first time we'd worked with the concepts of empowering them. Grandpa said it was essential if you wanted them to be more than squiggles, and I was trying my hardest to make them work. Trying, but ultimately failing. Grandpa, however, didn't seem too perturbed. It ain't easy. I struggled with it myself for a while, and I was a lot younger than you are. I sat back against the wall of the shed, listening to the crickets as they began to tune up in the early evening. Soon the mosquitoes would be out, and we'd have to retreat to the porch if we meant to enjoy the sunset. They had been exceptionally bad this year, the heat really not helping, and Grandpa and I were hoping for a good freeze this year, so they wouldn't be so bad next year. Grandma teach you this? I asked, wondering if Grandpa had taught Mom any of this. She did. Well, she taught me some of it. The runes, the sigils, they were all Grandma's. She taught me how to empower them, but the rest came from Nat. Uh-huh, I said, peeking from one eye. The mysterious Nat. How come I'm just now hearing about him? Grandpa smiled into the sunset. It wasn't time yet. There were quite a few things yet to tell in the story, kiddo. We sat in the gathering twilight, waiting for the skeeters as we enjoyed the gradual cooling of the stifling July day. This reminds me of the time I spent learning from him, actually. I was a bit impatient, too, and Nat was always smiling at me like one day I would know what it was all about. I imagine you might know a little something about that, too. I smiled, having some inclination of what he was talking about. I remember the early days when we were just starting out. I was sure I knew it all, sure I knew enough to get by, but Nat would show me how little I actually knew. I just sat there, knowing it would begin soon. Grandpa didn't need much prompting when it came for stories, and as we sat watching the day die, it was as good a time as any for a tale. I waved my hand at the first of the mosquitoes, too comfortable with the soil beneath me for a change of venue. It all started 2 mornings after the incident in the woods. That was the day that he arrived on John's doorstep, before first light. John woke me up as the first fingers of light crept up the horizon. I came awake slowly, opening my eyes like I couldn't believe what I was seeing. "You got a visitor," he said, his eyes full of mischief. "Who is it?" I asked, rubbing sleep from my own eyes. "Come find out. There's coffee in the kitchen," he said. I came into the kitchen about 10 minutes later to find the old man from the woods sitting with John and drinking coffee. He was dressed in furs, his hair long and gray, and when he saw me, his eyes twinkled with mischief. He smiled gummily at me as I came in, and the contrast between his baby pink gums and his nut brown skin was jarring. "You," I said, not sure what was going on. "What are you doing here?" "Came by to see if you'd be interested in learning something a little different from your mountain ways." How did you know I was from the mountains? I asked, looking at John distrustfully. The old man laughed. He didn't have to tell me nothing, boy. I can sense the old magic on you. It's in your walk. It's in your speech. It's in the way you tried to fight off the influence of the music the other night. You have talent, but it's raw and untrained. Someone never finished your instruction, and I'd like to fix that. I started to say something I would likely regret, but John must have read my face. My uncle doesn't offer to teach often, and he never offers twice. Think very carefully before you throw away something because you haven't had a cup of coffee and a moment to think about it yet. I started to flare at him too, but instead I took that coffee and had a minute to consider it as I let the warm morning glory wash through me. It was a heck of an offer. Grandma had never taken a student, except for me, and I felt like that might be common. The times were changing. Technology was beginning to rear its head, and most people didn't care about the old ways. This may be one of the last old-timers willing to pass on his secrets, and he had guarded them jealously. I'd be a fool not to take him up on it. So how about it, boy? The old man asked. Yeah, I said after a few seconds of thinking. I didn't have anything else to do today. He nodded. Call me Nat. I think you'll need more than an afternoon for what I'm going to teach you, though. We headed out into the woods before the sun was more than an annoying suggestion on the horizon. Feel the world awakening, boy. A new day's beginning. You're not the only one who knows about it. As we walked through the forest, I felt a chill that had absolutely nothing to do with any nip in the air. It was summer, and the days were at their least temperamental. But I was ill at ease in these woods. I had nearly lost my life here more than once, and I was proceeding in with someone who was a total stranger. Well, not a stranger, I suppose. He'd saved my life, kept me from death, and now he wanted to train me. I guess I just wanted to know why. Do you have such awakenings in Appalachia? He asked. I blinked. How do you know of Appalachia? The old man chuckled lightly. How much experience do you have with the spirit world? We stopped then, the old man taking a seat on a fallen log as he invited me to join him. A little, I told him. My grandmother always said that spirits of the dead were best left at peace, so long as they didn't bedevil the living. He turned to look at the rising sun, seeming lost in the brightening sky, before telling me a story of his own. 2 nights ago, while I lay asleep in my bed, someone came to me that was not of my tribe. I've been the spiritual leader of this tribe for a long time, and this was the first time I haven't been approached by a spirit that was of my land. The woman awoke me, told me I had to go right this moment, that her grandson was in great danger, and that I was the only one who could save him. So of course I went right away to help you. I looked at him in disbelief. Are you saying? I'm saying that your grandmother asked me to finish your instruction that night, as well as to save your life, he said gummily. So I suppose we should begin. He slid to the ground, his bony knees poking out from beneath his hides, and instructed me to do the same. I followed numbly, suddenly more willing to go along with the old man's teachings. The sun rises, a new day begins, and the energy in you is new as well. You can feel it in your stomach, a delicate chord of intentions and potential. Take hold of it, master it, and you can use it as a tool. Use it? I asked. Use it, he reiterated. Can you feel it? Just here, he said, putting a hand on my stomach. I could feel something there, like a ball of twine, and as the sun's rays hit my face, it seemed to come alive with errant heat. You feel it. Now you have to learn to direct it. We sat there till the sun was nearly over top of us, and I dare say I felt about the same as you when we rose to make our way home. How was my grandmother? I asked him, not sure what I meant. She's at peace, though hers is a spirit that seems unwilling to rest. She was a great woman, and you have not fallen far from her shadow. I smiled then, glad to hear she was doing well. You said we could use the power there. What did you mean? He chewed the question over, thinking of the best way to answer my question. When you form your runes, you use this to power them, yes? I nodded, feeling that I understood. Turning to the trees that surrounded us, he lifted his staff and spun. The boughs shook, and the birds took flight. When you know how to control it, you can use such will for all sorts of things, he said, flashing a wet smile. I studied under Nat for 5 years. In those 5 years, I learned much. I swiped a small cloud of mosquitoes away as the darkness settled around us. So you learned from a real magician then, I asked, and stood up as I rubbed the pins out of my legs. I learned the ways, spiritual and supernatural, from a medicine man in good standing with his tribe. Whether he was Merlin or not, I cannot say. Grandpa got up as well, his joints popping as he found his feet. And now, I believe I have given these little bloodsuckers enough to eat. As we walked back to the house, a thought occurred to me. So, can you do that? Do what? Grandpa asked. What he did in that clearing. Grandpa turned, his smile merry, as he thrust his hand toward me. The cloud of mosquitoes there was suddenly shoved away, and my hair was left standing on end. And so many other things, Grandpa chuckled, turning to head back inside. You're still here. I thought you might be. Thanks for joining me for tonight's story. If your insatiable appetite for horror knows no bounds, might I suggest one of our playlists, or one of our previous stories in the archive? There should be one appearing at the end of the story any minute now. And of course, if you're not subscribed, why not go ahead and hit that subscribe button? Maybe hit that notification bell so you don't miss any of the spooky things that we do here. If you prefer your horror a little more analog, you can always pick up one of my books. There's a link below to my latest, and it'll take you to all the great things that I've posted on Amazon. For my book lovers in the audience, I always suggest coming on down to Patreon so you can become part of my ghostly reader tier and get a book anytime I write one, which is usually about twice a year. Speaking of my patrons, let's go ahead and thank them, shall we? Thanks to Unicorn Hollow for being our spooky ghost contributor. Thanks to Janet and Lady Vengeance for being our spooky skeleton tier contributors. Thanks to Hi Stacy, Winter, Xaronan, Emily Coltsfoot, Stephanie Carrington, Marianne Schuler, Tyler Parker, and Jennifer Damron for being our ghostly reader tier contributors. Thanks, everyone. We just couldn't do the show without you. If you think you might like to support the show in a more monetary fashion, come on down to Patreon. I have many tiers. I'm sure you'll find one that suits you best. I always recommend the Ghostly Reader tier, since you get a signed book anytime I write one on your doorstep. But I have many tiers, and again, I'm sure you'll find one to suit you. And as always, thanks for stopping by. Dr. Plague, signing off. Have a wonderful evening.